Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Work from Home Best Practices, presented by David Wolfe and Doug Dahlberg. My name is Alyssa Chartier, and I'm pleased to be your moderator today. Before we jump in, make sure to introduce yourself and ask any questions, and click on the widgets below to resize them at any time during the presentation. Be sure to visit our website, ASTI.com, to see how to achieve your design and business objectives through innovative solutions, training opportunities, and services. And I'd be remiss if I didn't put a plug for ASTI.com/webinars. If you are looking to fill up your days and get a little more training under your belt, head on over. We've got training on almost every subject. And before we get started, David, Doug, and I would like to put a poll out to you guys. What is your current work situation? If you don't see an answer that applies to you, go ahead and drop your answer in the Q&A widget below. David, Doug, and I are working from home, as you can probably see from our backgrounds. David, how are you doing today?
Oh, pretty well. You know, as most people could probably tell, I would like to be working from the Rebel base or the Death Star, but we'll see what happens.
And Doug, what about you? Rebel base, or are you more of a Trekkie?
So choosing between your children, it's an impossible task. I'm going to say it's a Kobayashi Maru scenario.
Uh-oh.
That's a Trek.
I
stumped the moderators already. Okay, we're off to a fantastic start. All the IT people are throwing up in their coffee mugs right now.
All right, and we're going to push out the answer to that poll. Okay, so it looks like we're fairly even. If you feel like you're going to work from home pretty soon, let us know when you think that would be. We'd love to see kind of what's going on with you guys. And with that, I'm going to push the conversation over to David and Doug, but be sure to ask questions below at any time. Over to you guys.
Thank you, Alyssa. First of all, I just want to say thanks for all the people who are supporting us. I've been working at home for 10 years, over 10 years now, and I do not take for granted all the people who make our country work and get food on our tables by driving trucks, trash trucks, picking up the trash, maintenance people, and then also obviously the first responders and all the people who are prepping for what's going on. Big thanks to them, and we really want to support them in any way we can. And also, you know, the goal of this is just to kind of discuss some approaches to how we can work remotely using Autodesk software or whatever software we can find. We've gotten a lot of requests around working remotely, and we want to make sure to lay out all the options and some of the decisions that need to come into play. You know, we all need to take care of each other in this time. We need to make sure we have plans and we're not acting selfishly. And so we just want to present some approaches to getting success for working at home. And as Alyssa mentioned, we also have Doug Dahlberg on here. Doug, you've been the director of IT for a long time at Applied Software, and you got a lot of experience in building the technology offerings that we use every day. So it's a pleasure to have you on here.
Pleasure to be here.
And just a couple housekeeping things. We want to make sure everyone knows that we'll be publishing a link on our blog articles of all the links that we're referencing throughout this conversation. And we'll also send out an email with that information as well so that you can not have to jot notes down so quickly or try to remember URLs that we're shouting out. This is going to be a very formal and sort of conversation we want to have about this. You know, our approach over the last couple of weeks has been just talking about what things need to be considered. And so we wanted to bring this to the forefront and kind of talk about our process and how we can help people. Doug, I know in our conversations you had some things that you wanted people to be aware of what they should be getting out of this webinar. What do you think they should be looking for?
So one of the things we want everybody to know that is we're here to help. In Applied Software, David and I, we're here to help present a lot of the different resources that are available to us that sometimes we forget about. We want to run through some of the questions, some of the different options, and outline the choices and how you implement them, specifically around our work environment, because our work at home is a little bit different than, say, a traditional office. So we're a little bit different in that regard. So these are based on our experiences, David and I's. So your mileage will vary. So with that being said, sit back, buckle up, and enjoy the rest of the conversation.
All right, here we go. I know, Doug, we obviously follow Autodesk pretty closely, and they've put out some recent information about how they're changing some practices for working remotely. Can you summarize those for us?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So one of the things, there is a page, it will go out as part of the links in there, how they're responding to COVID-19. There were some recent license changes that they're going to postpone for a little bit. They're going to push it back. We all realize that, these are unprecedented times, the situation we're going to. Nothing has really happened like this before. And Autodesk, as being a good corporate partner, is making adjustments to that. They realize this is not the time for change. They're giving everybody extended windows on their changes. So we're really happy about that. And one of the other things that we like to remind, and since you brought up Autodesk, David, is one of the things we want to remind our users about is the at-home use licenses. One of the links we'll include in today's webinar is the products you can actually apply for to use at home in your own environment. I looked at that list this morning. I've taken advantage of it over the years because I've been doing this for like 30, and I've always been amazed at how many products you actually get for home use licenses. So we'll send out the link of how to apply for it, but that list is so robust. I didn't see anything that really wasn't covered. So, I mean, if you've got it at the office, you probably have the rights to use it at home. So that really is a kind of a neat resource that we're going to make sure everybody knows about. Let's see. Okay.
Let's see. So I had written a blog article kind of in a quick response to some of the questions we received around Plant 3D last week. And I just kind of want to cover some of those. My approach was taking, the least, what would require the least amount of changes to your infrastructure, and then kind of walk down from there. But you have a lot more experience around actually using these. So I wanted to, first of all, talk about the situation for RDP, or Remote Desktop Protocol.
But we're going to throw out a lot of acronyms today. Yep.
Yes, we will. I'll try to remember to define them, but if we don't, feel free to throw in a question in the Q&A. Yep. How would companies identify when they should use RDP, whether they should be allowing users on personal machines to access, and those types of scenarios?
All right, those are a couple of questions you rolled into one. I like that. So RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol, it's free technology by Microsoft. Let's be honest, I like free. It does allow you to remotely access another computer that's already set up. So if you think about it, if you're home and you want that, if you had a VPN, this is really, really critical. RDP is a great protocol. It's free for inside the office. When you go outside, you got to be able to get that communication inside. Unless you have a VPN established by your IT department, RDP is not a great solution, okay? One of the things that David and I were talking about earlier today was these are unprecedented times. A lot of companies are loosening the reins on some of their security requirements. We all are. We're all compromising what we're doing just a little bit to make it easier to work from home. One of the things the IT professionals are trying to be very cognizant about is not loosening it too much, because while I have not seen them yet, the COVID-19, the corona scammers have not come out yet. There are people who are going to try to take advantage of our work from home situations. They're going to try to take advantage of our lax security rules as we let people go home. So we want to be very cognizant of what we do. So RDP is a great protocol if you have access to it over a VPN, virtual private network. It is not something you want to use and just punch a hole in your firewall. It's something you don't want to publish and put out there. It's not a great solution for that. We're going to talk about during the conversation today, we're going to take questions from the audience. We're going to go over a couple of things of what you do. If you don't have this, what can you do? So a great alternative to remote desktop protocol. If you don't have it, log me in. Log me in is a good service enabled by your IT department on your computer that allows you remote access to it from your home computer. There's a whole slew of issues of why IT departments probably don't want your home computer to touch the network. Licensing, intellectual property, control of projects and ownership and stuff like that, LogMeIn allows you in and keeps it sandbox. That's a great solution for a lot of companies, but it's just one of them. As David and I said, we're going to do a couple different things on that subject. Let's see. Did that answer your question on RDP, David? Did I do a good job there?
It did. That was great information. So I know we're getting into questions when you start talking remote working. Licensing becomes a big deal because if you're using RDP, then your licensing is still taken care of by the same way that it was handled before. But when we start talking about some of these other options, licensing is one of the first things we need to evaluate to make sure we can do it, right?
Right. So what you're referring to is what Autodesk has specifically. Let's keep this in Autodesk, folks, around the licensing. If you're using a virtual desktop versus a physical computer. So if you're RDPing to your computer, that's not considered a virtual desktop because there's a keyboard at it that's used, right? If you are using a VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure, basically a little computer or multiple little computers running on top of a big server, that's called VDI. That's a different license model, as you pointed out, David. So you have to use, when you log into that little computer, that virtual system, you have to use a named user account, okay? You're not supposed to use multi-user unless you've gotten written exception from Autodesk.
Sure.
An Autodesk reseller like Applied Software could help you get that done. And most folks already know this that are running some sort of VDI infrastructure. So if you can't get to your computer, what's the next best thing, right? Get to a little rent-a-computer, right? On-premise VDI computer. It's a great alternative. It's still in-house. And one of the things David and I were chatting about offline, was all the stuff we're doing, we're changing how we're going to work from home. And one of the things David and I want everybody to understand is the amount of changes we put in for this new normal as we're working from home are the same things that we're going to have to probably undo, back off maybe when we go back to the old normal, right?
Right.
So changing the locations of files, changing the workflow, changing your networking practices. We just want everybody to think about what you're doing long term. While we're just trying to keep everybody billable, we all like being billable. I know our bosses do. We got to keep the lights on. We got to keep the money coming in. We got to be productive employees. But at the end of all of this, how much money are we going to spend putting it all back together? So that's why, as we're talking about the solutions, we're also going to be talking about the workflow. Dave is a workflow expert on so many different products. And it's just like what works, what is going to be the least amount of impact going to and then coming back? Because we got to think about long term, not just, what's not going to happen in the next 2 weeks, what's going to happen in 6 months from now.
Sure. So just kind of to throw a little wrench in our discussion and summarize. So the home use policy would be for people who were going to take the files out of their network, work on them on their personal computer, and then put them back at a time. Is that kind of how you'd summarize that?
Yeah. Yes. So home use. This is okay. So in case you are not granted one of the lucky ones who's got a company laptop, and you have a company laptop that's got a VPN, obviously this conversation is not for you because you probably already have a named user account for all your software on your laptop.
Right.
Then we're talking about what if you don't have that, right? Well, can you then go to something like remote desktop to go to your computer in the office? If you don't have that, then what do you do? Well, you can try LogMeIn to go to your desktop in there. And then the last one would be, well, if my home computer is really not up to snuff to run in Revit, hey, it's great for surfing the web, but it's not going to run Revit, right? So can we go use something like a VDI service? We talked about one of the things that we specialize in is virtual desktops in the cloud. You can sometimes, if you're very lucky, your IT department might have VDI already in your data center, and it's an option for you. Definitely encourage you to talk to them about it. But if you don't, one of the options that we recommend is WorkSpot, where you can simply rent the computer in the cloud for a short period of time or a long period of time, depending upon how this plays out. It's a great option.
Before we get too much far down into WorkSpot, looks like we have some questions from Alyssa. So we will get more into the VDI topic and cover some of that stuff, but we did cover some pretty big concepts. Alyssa, do you have some questions that we could read through and handle right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the questions is, are the home licenses available if you have network licenses or just standalone?
That's a good question.
I believe it's available to both.
Yes.
But I think your contract administrator would have the answer on that. I'm pretty sure they're available on both. But we can actually post that in the notes here at the end because we've got links that show you how to apply for it. So let's go roll into that one.
Yeah, we'll definitely put a bow on it, but I'm 90% sure you can use it. The home uses for network licenses as well as.
Yeah, I don't think they make a differentiation. It's a good point, David.
All right, Alyssa, is there another one?
Yeah, one of them is we have a VPN set up to use, but have never leveraged RDP for remote access. I'm assuming there may be some RDP services installed on our server. Is anything pre-installed?
Okay, so on the server, it's not going to. What each server comes with is it allows you to talk to two administrators to talk to it. In this case, what I would assume that the individual would want to have is a remote desktop service enabled on their office computer, if possible. And that is not by default out of the box. It does have to be turned on by the IT department, but they can do that in the background, and it doesn't require a lot. But all of those do require the IT department to take action. If they need additional information how to do that, contact us.
Yeah,
we have a department for that.
Perfect. And one more before I let you go on. Is there a good software, what would cause a VPN connection to be super slow if not using remote desktop?
Oh, that's kind of a broad question. It really would depend on a lot of things like what is the VPN endpoint at the office? Is it an old firewall, right? Is it has it had bandwidth throttling turned on? So you have the ability to say, you know what, I'm going to restrict the user coming in based on their bandwidth. Could it be a lot of different hops between the end user and the firewall that they're trying to hit? One of the biggest things we tell our remote users is if you can be hardwired instead of Wi-Fi, go to hardwire. There's so much latency in the Wi-Fi that will affect stuff like RDP, voice over IP communications, like if you're using Skype or Zoom or Teams or whatever different voice over IP client for your phone calls. Wi-Fi doesn't help that. So if you can at all be hardwired, see if that helps them. But try to get off the Wi-Fi at best as possible.
Yeah, so that's like a side note on that one. You can definitely run Ethernet. One thing that I've done, because I'm in an older house that doesn't have it, is I use these adapters called Mocha 2. And so they let you use the coax and run your internet over the coax, and you get decent. I can still get a 400 megabit connection throughout my house just through using those. So it was like $150 and some rerouting of some Ethernet stuff, but less than doing my whole house.
That's pretty cool, David. Yeah, there's a lot of different products out there, but it's always nice to have an actual somebody who knows, who's used it and likes it. So we'll make sure that link is included at the end of this webinar.
Well, let's see. Are there any other questions, or was that the last one for now?
I have one more, and then I'm going to turn it back over to you. What is the preferred Mbps broadband connection?
Oh, they're looking for speed, preferred Ethernet speed.
Okay. Okay, so if you're doing, I'm assuming this one's relating to the RDP, you're going to need anywhere from 2 to 5 megs up and down just for your connection. So if you're remoting into your office and you're connecting to a remote desktop via RDP or whatever, you're going to need 2 to 5 megabytes at least up and down just for that application. So if you're thinking about it, so if you're running Outlook or your phone app, or there's somebody in the house else working, take all that in consideration, because you're going to need 2 to 5 just for that one application. And that's going to be constant.
Okay. So it sounds like you might need to kick your kids off of Netflix if they're taking up the bandwidth.
Right. So as a lot of users out there, my kids are home from school. They have what are called digital learning days. So they're online right now. I mean, they're doing their work. Xbox is automatically a Netflix or on band till 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in our house.
There you go.
Only work and school apps are allowed.
Nice. Yeah, I had to turn off the PS4 as well. So, well, let's jump into some of this conversation around VDI.
Sure.
And there's several different considerations. But let's say, for whatever reason, remote desktop doesn't seem the most sustainable long-term, or they want to enable people to work even more remotely than RDP would allow them to work, potentially.
Right.
How would they know if WorkSpot or VDI is the right solution for them?
Kind of depends on those workflows. So if we were doing something like, say, Revit, right? Revit is a pretty high-end application. If you don't have a company laptop, right, with a good video card in it at home, Revit's going to be a really tough one to pull off on a home user's computer. Right. Yes, you could use something like BIM 360. We'll get to the collaboration platforms here shortly as for files, but that one's going to be really hard to pull off because Revit just doesn't run on anything. It does require a good amount of horsepower. So does Civil 3D and Inventor also. You know, these applications are really robust, and typically our home computers we've been buying lately don't do that. So how you use Revit, you know, if you're using it in a multi-user environment and you're all working in the same model, VDI supports that because you're all in that same environment. You're all in the same little cloud bubble together, so you could work on that model collaboratively, just like in the office. And that's what we're trying to do, is duplicate the in-office feel when it comes to VDI. So that's a good success model. If you don't have the laptop, you don't have a home computer, it's kind of like, what can you do next, right? If you can't get to it, you know, get to a similar situation, right? And that's what VDI does bring. It's going to simulate just like being in the office.
So is it safe to say that's the most robust long-term solution for people looking to do that?
I would say it is one of them, absolutely. Don't want to, you know,
right.
tell people that it is the absolute, but yeah, I'm going to be honest. We don't have to do equipment rollouts. You could run it on a Mac, right? If your kids have a MacBook for school, you could access it that way, because a lot of these are going through a cloud connector. So all you need is internet access. There's no VPN to set up. There's none of that. You know, the way that VDI is set up, that's already done for you. So as far as the end user is concerned, is he's going to access, you know, just this resource in the cloud, and it's just going to be like in the office. It's going to have all his applications installed. And one of the things I think we miss when we talk about home use and stuff like that is most Autodesk users have a very tuned environment, right? You know, we have our AutoCAD shortcuts set up. We have our Civil 3D stuff configured. We have Revit configured the way we want to use it. Well, now when you do something like home use, well, you got to duplicate it again, right? If you get into the habit of you choosing just the VDI, that becomes your go-to, and it's one setup. You can use it in the office. You can use it at home. You can use it on site, on a project site. It becomes one of those things that becomes the norm, and it kind of does displace that. So your setups, you preserve. And I know a lot of Autodesk users. I mean, we tweak our environments, don't we? And going to work somewhere else, we spend a good 15 to 30 minutes just putting everything right back to where we're used to, right? So that having that consistency, I think, really, really helps.
Nice. Let's see. I think we're transitioning to talk about collaborating with BIM 360.
Yeah, let's talk about, you know, some of the stuff that we talked about as far as collaborations. I think BIM 360 is a good platform that you're kind of a little expert on, David. So that being said.
So yeah, just to outline the big picture of offerings. So you have Revit, obviously, AutoCAD, Inventor. There's a bunch of different offerings there. And first, let me also put together kind of the picture for what are the BIM 360 offerings. So BIM 360 Design would be an offering for users who are going to edit and create the CAD models or the BIM models. So that's geared towards reading and writing information towards the BIM 360 platform. BIM 360 Docs would be the core read access that we might offer up to, let's say, a project manager or someone else who needs to view the file information. And then there's other applications for like field for users who would want to do checklists or other types of reporting information. And so really though, since we're talking about working at home, we're going to focus on the BIM 360 design pieces. And so as Doug mentioned, there's a lot of information. We put these tweaks in, we're sharing these projects, but there's a lot of other contextual files that we use to do our designs. And so one of the core themes that we'll talk through is, along with BIM 360 design, what are some of these other tertiary applications that you need to support the entire engineering design workflow? And so I know like people who are using Fab, we have some clients using Dropbox and OneDrive for that. Some other things can be done as far as like with regular AutoCAD, you can use the desktop connector. And then Plant 3D also has its own implementation of BIM 360 design that currently connects to BIM 360 Team. So these are all pieces of getting the work done that different applications use to fit them to fit the whole project information together. Let's see. And kind of along those lines, we also talked a little bit about file locking, Doug, and you had some comments around that because, like you were mentioning, as we shift to allow working from home, we have to be very careful with how we're going to put this back. So what were you thinking around file locking, and why is it important to test our processes for which service that we're using?
That's a good question, David. And actually, I'm going to flip it back on you, buddy. All right. So you talked about BIM 360. You're the BIM 360 expert here. All right. So Revit and BIM 360, is that a great solution?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What makes that excel?
So that handles people working off-site or in a disconnected way, like just from the get-go. There are other options like Revit Server that were designed more for sharing models between two corporate sites, right, where you're both behind firewalls, you're both on the same wide area network. But
internal collaboration.
Correct. Yep. So the design offering really allows people who are not in that same scenario, which is what most of our home users are going to be in now, to continue working. So I guess along the lines, the Plant 3D has a little bit more information around it, and I'm the expert on that one specifically. So let's kind of cover that. Around Plant 3D, you have the project information that's getting shared, but then you also have to share information like your catalogs and your CAD standards, because just like with regular AutoCAD, we all have profiles we've customized, we have line types, we have fonts, and other things that are crucial to our workflows that we have to find a way to synchronize. And so we've looked at several offerings, and there are several different ways to share the catalog and background information. We have a tool called Sync 360, which can store that up in BIM 360 and pull it down. You might use Dropbox, you might use OneDrive. You can use the Autodesk Desktop Connector to some degree. But just kind of around, especially that desktop connector piece. And this is something that we'll test out over the next couple of days. But I've tested it like for example, using with Advanced Steel. And you can definitely open up the AutoCAD file, do your operations in Advanced Steel, create drawings, and it works very well. But I haven't tested it in a multi-user environment. So I just want to put a caveat out there right now. We're taking this a day at a time. So the next thing we need to test for that workflow is to make sure that two users can get on using, let's say, AutoCAD or Advanced Steel and see if the file locking happens. So we might have to do some more communication. Just, telling people which file we're in, through some other service rather than expecting the file locking to happen, depending on whether we're in Dropbox or OneDrive or BIM 360 for AutoCAD.
And like we said, your mileage will vary. So I'm glad you brought up 360 Sync. As we are getting ready to discuss the different storage platforms and file locking, 360 Sync is a great product, as we talked about earlier, because it helps you get your stuff synced up to your new location, wherever that may be, but it helps you put it back. So as we go back to being normal after this is all done, that will enable you to go to whatever medium you want to do, whether it be BIM 360, SharePoint, or whatever, because it supports so many different platforms. It's a very extensive list. It'll also help you sync it back down to your original environment so that you're back to normal. I mean, I want to point out it's a great product to help enable this and to help you mitigate it back to normal, right? So that was BIM 360. So does it support Civil 3D?
Yes, but a lot like the 360 design workflow for Civil 3D has been focused on going to Revit. So there's going to be some caveats around there as well.
I think it's version specific, correctly?
Yes, that's right.
It's version specific, and
2020.
2020, yeah, I believe that's correct. We'll have a more notes on that further in. Yeah. So it's definitely a great workflow for a lot of different products. Some products, it's not as good as the others. Like, let's say Revit, it's really smoking great at. Civil 3D, it's great in specific use cases.
Sure.
Under the right circumstances. So, one of the things we want to talk about, okay, so BIM 360, it's a great platform. Some of the other platforms you mentioned earlier was Dropbox. I do know that Dropbox works pretty good in the fab arena, depending upon how you have your databases set up and how they're synced. But like as you said earlier, setup is everything. So if anybody who has questions about how that is set up, the fab products using Dropbox, give us a shout out. We've got experts on here that can help you with that. I got a brief talking to yesterday, about how it's set up and works. And it's really, these guys are really geniuses. And I don't get to say that very often in the IT world. You get to meet really, really genius people. But yeah, how that's set up in that workflow is really kind of cool. Let's talk about some other platforms, David. So, file locking. Thank you for the reminder. You actually reminded me earlier. Okay, so all these different file platforms. Dropbox, Box, SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, right? All these cloud-based services. File locking, you pointed out there, and you wanted to make a point of this. If you go back to like the old AutoCAD days, you had a DWL file you would make for a lock in a network. So we all know, I can't open it. Jim's got that file, right? That doesn't exist. That's not really supported in a lot of these different environments. BIM 360 controls that to a degree in certain workflows, but the other ones, they don't do that. So what you said earlier about communication. So if I'm going to work in a file, I better let everybody know I'm working that file, say in Dropbox, because if two people work in the same file, the last person who saves his file wins. So I could work all day and Jim can come behind me. I'm not picking on Jim, sorry. If he's the last person to save, my changes are gone. Jim wins. So we got to be very careful about using the different platforms because they don't always support the file locking that we require with our products.
Definitely. And I know, like on the services side, this is all very rapidly changing over the last couple of weeks. So we haven't had scalable offerings that we could offer out. Most of our training to this point has been done just a client at a time. Typically, it's been taking 4 to 6 hours to get someone transitioned to the BIM 360 platform. And so what we're looking at and what you'll see over the next couple of weeks is we're going to put out some more services geared towards a more scalable format. So we have live lab learning, which is something we put on. We'll probably end up putting some offerings there. We're also putting up finishing touches on a guide for Plant 3D on BIM 360. That'll be available for free download. And again, that's walking through these issues that we've mentioned, where we have to make sure we have not just our project synchronizing, but we also have these other supporting files that we need to get pushed around. And so the goal really, like we said at the start of this, the whole goal of this is we want you guys to have the information that you need to be successful and to keep working and to keep as close to life as normal as we can make it. And so we're going to be doing our best to get out some solid offerings that can get everyone off the ground and running as quickly as possible on this. Let's see. Doug, you've been, Applied Software has been mostly remote for, I think 60% of our people are remote prior to this anyways.
Yes, prior. As of Monday, we're 100% remote.
Yeah, and so we've needed not just our Autodesk offerings to be able to do collaboration types of things. And I know you've put together some packages for us to use. What are some of the tools that you found, and why do you like some of these tools that we work to get work done? We used to get work done.
Right. So the thing about being remote is we want to make sure that the culture continues. The conversations continue. The last thing we want is for anybody to feel isolated. Yeah. I mean, technically, a lot of places they're not locked down or under quarantine, but that's what it feels like when you work from home, that you're kind of set away in a box all by yourself. So those normal communications, the conversations you would have with people aren't always there. So we try to find technology and leverage that technology that gives us back that culture, right? That gives us back that feeling. So one of our main technologies we lean on is Zoom. Zoom has got a lot of it's a video collaboration. It's not just for voice. There's a lot to be said for video conversations versus a voice conversation. You get the eye-to-eye contact. You get the visual cues of, did the person respond? Did they like what I say? What's their body language? I mean, you get so much more of that than, say, just a text conversation, an email, or even a voice conversation. And I think it really goes to a great extent of keeping people plugged in, motivated. Motivation is really big at this time. These are uncertain times, and we're trying to take the uncertainty out of, get back to normal, talk to our people. And then Zoom has got a great grid feature, so you can have very large conversations really easy. And then one of the neat things I like about it, you can sign up for an account for free, and you can do meetings up to 100 people, up to 40 minutes long on the free account. I mean, that's awesome. Pretty cool. I mean, I like free. I got 2 kids that are going to be in college in a few years. I appreciate how we could save money. Yeah. So, but yeah, Zoom is a great.
Meetings is awesome too, right?
What?
If we shorten the meetings to 40 minutes, that's awesome too, right?
Oh, I don't think you'll get a single complaint about anybody. Yeah. Oh, you know what? Meeting ended. It's a timer, right? So you got that ability there. So it's great. It's available on Windows, Android, and iOS devices. So it covers all the platforms, and we will have links in there. Even all our schools here are using Zoom for our students to stay in touch and to have virtual classrooms. All right, option number 2 about collaborative platforms that we really enjoy. It's got to have video and voice and stuff like that. It's Teams. So a lot of companies already had Teams. If you had like an E3 license or a business license, you were already using it. It's a great platform that does video, voice, as I said. It also has file collaboration, project collaboration, where you can set up little micro teams that have access to specific files and projects and that kind of stuff. Microsoft, beginning of the year, just rolled out free Teams. It has everything but the file collaboration portion of it. Wow. But we're going to include the link down here, but you can actually use Teams for free. It's available, of course, on Windows and iOS devices. Android too. So
very nice.
Let's see, what else do we have here? All right, I do want to make one comment. The equipment you use at home, right? You've got a nice setup. I'm looking at your setup, David. It looks pretty cool. Very, very nice and neat from home. I think as we work from home, we definitely want to extend that professionalism, and good quality equipment is important. I'm wearing a headset here today. It's got active noise canceling on the microphone because, well, I have a dog and I have 2 kids, and I don't want everybody in this meeting to hear my dog or my 2 kids. So I'm just trying to extend that level of professionalism through the right selection of equipment. Now, you've worked from home, I think you said 10 years?
Yes.
In the very beginning of this? So what have you learned? What kind of tips and tricks can you share with us?
Yeah, well, so like along those lines, the professionalism is a deal. The headset's a big deal. Having it canceling is great. I do like on our team meetings, we have weekly team meetings. And so those are a more personal feel. So typically everyone's showing up a little scruffy, because we are coming into their homes, and that's real life sometimes. So there is some of that as well. And then also everyone needs to know about Star Wars. So I feel strongly about getting the word out about that movie series. No, but
what series? I've never heard of it. Star what?
Yes. So I've been doing remote work for a long time. One of the biggest things I've done is investing in a standing desk and a nice mat to stand on, and just making sure that you're transitioning body postures every 30 minutes or so. Because if you sit for a long time, I can get hyper-focused on the work, and, that's not good for your hip flexors, and you need to start doing stretches and things like that. So really kind of keeping an eye on your long-term habits and making sure that you're moving. One tip I got a while ago, and I've used it successfully, is to have a glass of water. There you go.
Keep you hydrated and keep you moving.
Got to stay hydrated, and then every time it empties, you get up and go refill the glass, and then you're making sure you stand regularly. And then probably the last tip is just to make sure that we all get consistent working hours. So it's very tempting to try to solve all work problems in one day and just keep working. But just taking the family time to make sure you start and stop and communicate that then is very key for long-term success at your company, right? And as a company and as a group, we want to emphasize ways to build culture that are healthy and relational too.
Right. Happy employees make for a happy company. Having that separation, because I will say that's one thing folks will struggle with is that separation between work and home life, because work is in my home life. It's in my house, right? So the separation becomes very challenging. And I think a lot of those habits you pointed out are key to continuing our culture, because you don't want to feel like you can't get away from it because it's here. It followed me home. It's in my house. It's in my room. We want to continue that culture. And then also, you know what? It is easier to work here. I will say for me, not having to do the long commutes in Atlanta traffic, that I pick up 2 to 3 hours a day by doing this. Now, what I do with those 2 to 3 hours, reflects a lot of my overall health, my attitude in life. So doing more work, spending some time with family, actually taking time for lunch. I don't know about you, but that's one of the things I tend kind of forget about here.
I love lunch a little too much. I'm like a constant grazer. I love lunch too much.
Oh, you love it too much. I forget about it, to be quite honest, because my wife will text, hey, have you had lunch yet? And I'm like, no, she won't bring something. I'm like, sure. And so I'm kind of lucky. So I don't leave my desk. It's kind of, it's interesting. I'm not the veteran that you are from working from home for 10 years straight. I do it on occasion, several times a week, but as this becomes our new normal, I think it's just establishing the rules in our own personal life, leveraging the technology we can, right? And then, and just trying to make the best of this. And, this conversation we've had back and forth, which I felt has been a conversation we have, including our audience here, is, these are our tips and tricks. We want you to send yours in, share with us what works for you, because we're all in this together, as you said, David. So whatever we learn, we want to share.
Definitely. And so like what you'll be seeing over the next couple of weeks is some more service offerings from us around adopting, and maybe some guidelines around, let's say, using Teams, or I don't even know what's going to come out, but maybe Teams or Zoom or some of these, how they impact our work and getting work done. Microsoft, Autodesk, all these companies are also working hard. So we're also seeing this is going to stress our infrastructure to some degree because of the number of people working from home. And so, we all are going to need patience at some points. We're going to have to understand that there's going to be some disconnects at some points, and be a little bit flexible around that.
Deep breath.
Yes, deep breaths. Alyssa, did you have any more questions for us to run through?
Yes, I do. We have quite a few, actually.
Awesome.
And I'm going to start with one that maybe our audience can answer, because I'm not sure if I have an answer to this one. Is there a good software to essentially replace an office whiteboard with sticky notes? Any ideas? Any software pop up into your head?
Oh, let me, I'm going to start Googling frantically, because I know I ran across one.
Well, okay, so a whiteboard replacement, is that what I heard?
Correct.
Okay, so Zoom, in a Zoom meeting, there are whiteboards. You can whiteboard with you and your team, so you can all mark on it. And at the end of this session, it does save it out in Zoom. I think Teams has a similar thing. It might actually be called Whiteboard. You could also use Notes collectively, I believe, which is Microsoft Notes. I believe it can do that also. But those are a couple. But yeah, I'd like to see some people's alternatives there.
Yeah, that'd be great. I know. I'll put the link in the notes. I know one that I actually saw. It does the sticky notes, just like a regular, if you were doing a process conversation. And,
okay.
Very cool. And some people, thank you for putting that in the chat. Someone mentioned Teams. I haven't used that feature, but maybe they have it. And Microsoft Planner apparently can do that as well. Thank you, guys.
Yep, Planner. Nice. That's a good one.
All right.
Community learning. I like this.
Someone put in the chat, I think this is about the network licenses, that home use is for network license only, but standalone licenses can be installed on 2 computers and only used on 1 computer at a time. Does that sound right to you?
Yes.
Yes. So the standalone, I think you get 3 installs, but to their point, you can only use it one at a time. But yes,
Right.
You can install it more than once, but only use it from 1 location. So use it at home, go to work, use it at work. Good point.
Gotcha. And one of our very own asked, would a Chromebook work in the VDI environment?
Yeah, if you were to use, there's a couple different offerings out there, but yeah, you could actually use a Chromebook through a web browser to get to the VDI. That is correct. So that's a very cheap alternative. I know a lot of schools are doing that, actually.
Gotcha.
And we deliver some of our training over Frame, which is basically a similar offering.
Correct. It's a VDI on a cloud service. Exactly right.
Next question is, we have a couple of current Revit projects. If we have 2 working at home on Revit from the same model separately, can the 2 files be combined later?
Oh,
I'm going to defer to you, David, on the Revit part. I'm a Civil 3D guy.
One of our Revit experts to answer that one. Take a note of that and get back to you. So the question is basically, can we merge the models at the end? So we'll have someone post. When we send the email out, we'll get that answer looked up and have some more information around that.
Yeah. I'm not going to be holding my breath on that one.
No.
Someone asked, sorry, I joined.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Someone
Go
asked,
ahead, Alyssa.
sorry, I joined late. Will this be posted shortly after? Yes, you can use your registration link to watch this at any time after it's aired. So you can refer to it as much as you want. We will also be posting an infographic with the info that we dropped today, hopefully later this week. Another question from Dave. I work with Fabrication SMEP and can request a home license. Will this allow me to install applications at home? How do I access my database that is installed on my desktop?
So that would require coordination with your team in your IT department, because you'd have to use a file sharing platform like Dropbox to enable that. Now,
Right.
That requires some really good setup. Fortunately, I happen to know some really good guys on our team that are experts at that, and they work on that all the time. So if he would like to contact us, I can put him in touch with our experts, Garrett, Sean, and the rest of the team to walk him through that.
All right,
Great
then
question.
we will get back to you on that.
Great one.
Someone says, good morning. Do you guys have any advice on how to track users' productivity remotely?
So that is the age-old question. And when we first started with working from home, is how do you make sure people are still doing their stuff? One, this is my point of view. I've been here for 6 years. I was in another firm for 23 and a half. You got pretty good hiring practices, I'm going to say, probably. So you probably hired really good people. For me, if I hire good people, I'm going to trust them. On the flip side of that, how do I know? How can I tell what they're working on? By looking at the production. If the models aren't being done, if the drawings aren't happening, the red lines aren't being processed, that's our big deal. It's not so much as us hovering over them, because you don't do that in the office. You're looking at the production. Are they meeting their deadlines? If they're not meeting their deadlines, that's it right there. It's kind of there's going to have to be a little bit more trust, and trust that you hired the right people, you did a good job, you vetted them out, and kind of go from there. David, you got anything on that one?
Yeah, so in my experience, there's a couple things. You do need a good project management software, in my opinion. And so there's a lot of different offerings out there that are tracking project progress. And that's just, again, to help make sure that, like Doug was saying, that the work is getting done, where the status is. The other part of that is just how you check in with your team. Like, are they setting self goals are they letting you know what their own deadlines are going to be for a certain task? So if they say, I'm going to get this done by the end of the day, or is this going to take me 4 hours? If you check in, what's that look like? And so that really kind of is a way to get the metrics that you want without having to go through a formal process of always looking over their shoulder, right? You really just want this to be about communication. And everyone's first concern when they start moving to this model is, well, can I trust my people? And I think you really see that by and large, you really can. And people really do value being able to work from their home. And if they really value that, then they're going to do their best to earn that trust.
Right. Yeah. But, David, I think you pointed out something very good there about the communication, because keeping direction, keeping people focused, communication is a big part of that. If you don't communicate with your staff on a regular basis, you don't have a regular cadence, you don't stay in touch. Some people who aren't used to working from home can just waller. I mean, they can just sit there and not get anything done because they're not focused, right? They need sometimes more attention until they get used to this. So that communication, I think, is critical to making sure people are continuing working. Not that we're beating them over the head. What do you need? What can I help you with? How can I help you prioritize, this first, that second, that kind of stuff? Not to that degree, but for some people. But communication, I think, David, what you made is a great and excellent point.
Yeah, and so if we look at the developer world, because the developers have been doing remote work for ages, right? This is nothing new. Almost every coder is off by himself in a lot of situations. There's not a lot of large teams that are all connected all the time. And so one of the things that they have is a concept called a huddle. And so that's just a quick stand-up meeting, or a meeting where everyone shows up first thing in the morning, same time every day, 15 minutes. It can't go longer than that, just to get everyone on the same page. And so, making sure you're reaching out to people every day. Every person needs to be talked to at least once a day by someone in the company, because otherwise it feels incredibly isolating.
Yes,
and so
good point.
That's a big part of ensuring that your culture continues.
You had me at 15 minutes, Dave. You had me at 15.
Sorry.
15 minutes.
Me too.
You had me there already. Yeah. All right. What else you got, Alyssa?
I think I've got two more for you. So this person is asking, our situation is we have PC towers, use Revit, AutoCAD Fabrication, and Navisworks. We would probably have to take our towers home, so our concern is connecting to the server for our files on the server.
Okay.
Can you
that is
speak to that?
Challenging. So, you can take them home. Your files are on the server. Unfortunately, a lot of your Autodesk, applications are not really good with that distance. When you are accessing files remotely, and that's where a lot of these cloud services kind of excel, I can open that file from here to the office, but it's going to be much, much slower, and it's going to cause issues. Bigger files have a tendency to get corrupt because it's a much longer communication cycle to there. Plus, on top of that, you're going to have to add a security layer like a VPN or something to take home. So just taking your stuff home, you're separating the compute from the files, right? You're actually, that distance will actually cause corruptions inside of Revit, Civil 3D models and stuff like that. You're much better off keeping the compute next to the file and come in with a solution where you either hit the server or the workstation remote, or you take the files home with you, or you work in a VDI type environment. But just taking the workstations home away from the server is going to cause a lot of issues, especially in the Revit world, the fabrication world, and you're not going to enjoy your experience inside of Navis. Not at all. It's really going to be unbearable.
Yeah, and so that's really the direction we want to steer people away from, I think, and to do more something like RDP, where you have a lighter client viewing the actual file.
Yeah, that's exactly right, David. Well said. And we're happy to talk with them if they want further direction, by the way, Alyssa.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, please go ahead and email us if you have questions or you want to talk to someone further. I can redirect you to the correct person if you just send it to events@asti.com. I'm happy to forward your email to Doug or Seth or any one of our wonderful professionals over here. And I have one more question before we close out, because we want to be respectful of everyone's time. The question is, I have a work laptop with a VPN. Accessing files across the internet can be slow. Any recommendations for accessing these? For example, a civil 3D drawing can have large surfaces and images and have external references to multiple files.
Yeah, that's exactly the situation we were talking about. So it's because the compute, again, is separate from where the files are, right? And that end user is pointing out a really common situation. So you can use, BIM 360 to pull things down, but you're pulling it down over your internet connection, which is not the same as being in the office. So you either cache the files locally somehow, which then changes, your workflow is separate from everybody else's, which causes an issue for versioning files at the office. You no longer have that single source of truth. The best thing in that case is to really just, how do you get the compute next to the files and not change it as much? That's a little more complex conversation. If they would like to talk to us directly, me and Dave, we're happy to have that conversation with them and kind of go over, see what other resources they have. I mean, they just kind of listed off a few, but we'd like to see what else they've got and maybe kind of help them develop a solution, because it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of situation. We'd like to learn more to give a better answer.
All right, and that looks like all we have for now. David, Doug, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I know we turned around this webinar really quickly, but I think it was important, and you guys did great. What a great conversation.
Thank you, Alyssa.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
And thank you to everyone for joining us today. We appreciate you spending your time with us and trust it was meaningful and impactful for you and your business. Please let us know if you have any more questions, and we look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Thanks, everyone.